All right, welcome back to Rewind and Replay. I'm Matan,
I'm Caitlin.
And I'm Adriana.
and today we're here with Evan Hill, a level designer for The Last of Us Part 2. First off, Evan, we'd like to thank you so much for coming to take the time to talk with us today. All three of us are such big fans of Last of Us, especially the part you worked on in Last of Us 2. Before we get into it, I would like to add that I just finished this game about 45 minutes ago, so it's still an open wound, and I have a lot of feelings about it that we're going to get into.
We should
That sounds
also,
like it's going to be worth unpacking.
I'm sorry. We should also add that big spoiler alert for anyone listening. We will be talking lots of spoilers for the game, so if you haven't played yet, you may want to avoid this podcast until you finish.
Absolutely.
Well, you don't know, and I don't care.
Take it away, Gail.
All right. So for the audience's sake, would you mind telling us a little bit about your role in particular and how you ended up working on the best scene in the game?
I don't know if I can specify that last part, but I can talk about what I did. On Last of Us 2, I was brought on as a level designer. So to kind of get everybody up to speed, the closest normal equivalent to that would be like a storyboard artist. So if you think about, say, an animation project like Adventure Time, the storyboarders are the people who get the like real rough beats tuned in and then like iterate on it until you can literally just like flip through it and understand what the episode's going to look like. We basically do that in 3D. But in Naughty Dog, it also has the extra weight of being the central producer and often the narrative designer for whatever sequence is going on. So in addition to like figuring out what all the core beats are and how they all come together, it's like once that's all decided, we then pull out notebooks and make sure everybody knows what they need to have done and when they need to have it done by, coordinate all the meetings, make sure everything gets in, polish it, and just otherwise like make it all work. Like being that like central hub of communication for everybody to talk to everybody else. So forget the other part of the question. So that's what a level designer does. And at Naughty Dog, yeah, it's this big chunky thing. For me, I kind of just like stumbled into Naughty Dog in particular. I had moved off my more recent project, which is Solar Ash. It hasn't been released yet, but it's by the Hyperlight Drifter team. And Naughty Dog was honestly just close. And I knew it was a long shot, so I took it and I got it. Basically, when you apply for any level design position, they generally want an example of your work. In this case, it's basically like spend a week demonstrating that you understand what makes Last of Us work. So they kind of identify and want you to break down the style. Like how is space laid out? How do you draw the eye? How do you get people to move through a space or otherwise communicate emotions and thoughts through level design? And then I think at the time, I was one of close to 100 applicants, and I was the only one who made it through.
Wow.
That's impressive.
Yeah, they're really, really, really selective. And I was also, for the longest time, the youngest level designer there. Not to brag, just to kind of show like the general bar that they set. I was the youngest level designer there at the age of like 27.
Wow.
Yeah.
So it's generally like, just more to clarify, like it's a role that generally requires about like 5 years experience, a lot of other diverse things. So it's certainly not like an entry level position that you can just like roll into.
Yeah, of course.
As for how I wound up working on the museum, it was honestly just handed to me. They're to kind of extend in my application, like they felt that my work looked so much like Last of Us 1 because I focused so much on copying and like replicating the style. They're just like, okay, cool, you're going to do the parts that are literally supposed to be Last of Us 1. And it kind of ballooned out from there into what it is now, which is this, non-violent, focused narrative beat between Ellie and Joel.
Yeah, for 2/3 of us, your part was our favorite scene of the game entirely. And we've been dying to know. This moment is so iconic, but how exactly did hats on dinosaurs become a thing? What genius can we thank for this?
It was literally just a stupid offhand joke I made in the middle of a pitch meeting.
It was you.
Not even
Wow.
Oh, wow.
I can't credit any level of genius, but it was just like it was literally meant to be both a joke because like, to Joel and to everybody there, because the way we kind of pitch through levels is literally Neil will sink in and start talking as the characters. I remember he like really caught me off guard at one point because he was like looking at the level and he's like, hey, what is that over there? And it was just like a messy piece of geo I made. So it was like, oh yeah, I need to do another pass on it. Texas are all messed up. And he just turned to me and like dead stared. That's a weird thing for Joel to say. Like, oh, okay, this is what's happening.
Time for role play.
That's fun.
So you like Neil and the other designers like sit through and basically like role play the sequence, and it was just a result of that. It was just basically improvisation. Of course, from there, they thought I was actually joking, and me and my technical designer, Andrew Frost, kind of left the meeting and just kind of looked at each other. Was like, so we're doing that, right? And we're like, yeah, of course we're doing that. Like, that needs to be a thing now. And we kept bringing it up for a while, and the directors kept going like, ha, 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 you and your callbacks. That was a good joke. Anyway, moving on.
Wow.
So we actually got it fully into the game in time for the first big review meeting for like the alpha. And so we had it like basically exactly how it is now, same animation, same setup, and the entire room just busted up laughing, and so we were able to keep it. But it was like up until that point, literally the directors thought I was just like shitposting anytime I was like, oh yeah, Hats on Dinosaurs. Like, what do you want about that? It's like, ha, 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 no, but like what's actually in the level? Get back to it's actually in there.
I love that.
That's such a great development story.
Mm-hmm.
In terms of writing and designing this level, did you work a lot with the voice actors or the narrative leads or like a lot of other teams, or was it mostly you and Andrew Frost, or like?
So the people I worked with least were the voice actors. It was mostly handled by Neil, Hallie, and like Becky Dodd, who's like our voice coordinator. They're kind of the more, and then there's the whole audio department. They work more directly with getting the performances, selecting the performances, tuning them, deciding what the dialogue is. As for that, I worked with everybody else. So in terms of writing it, it's really just like a close relationship between me and Andrew on the like level design side, on the immediate design side, and then we would just coordinate really directly with Hallie, Neil, and then the other directors would kind of oversee it. So just kind of like the simplest way to compare it would be like we were in the writer's room, essentially. So like Neil and Hallie were always making the final decisions. They were pushing things forward, but we would sit, we would break ideas, we would kind of talk through what we would want to have happen in the level, and it would just be this back and forth where it's like if we decided on something that needed to be added visually, I would have to go back, redo major sections of the level to try and communicate that, show it to them. They would write a new version of the script in response to that. Then we'd go back to storyboarding because they're in the middle of writing that script. They figure something else they want. So like initially it was just like 2 paragraphs of prompting and like a story meeting. And it was actually going to end at the space capsule with the Firefly graffiti on it. And it was literally just supposed to be like a 5-10 minute sequence. But as we just kept breaking it and digging into it, we wanted to explore it more and more. We just kept pulling more and more out of it. I think it really clarified when like Neil just came back with the space capsule scene, pretty much just like entirely written as is, and say like, can we like let's do this with this. And at that point I'm like, all right, cool. So in response to that, not only just did I have to build out the space area more intensely, I then had to figure out how to basically build the third act of that sequence. So like that's when we started developing like the Natural History Museum as this extra wing where everything's a lot more, you know, spooky and kind of pulling the tone back down to the central part of the main game. So it's like, yeah, I guess the long and short is it's this very fluid, very iterative process. Like the big secret for like Naughty Dog is just that we just work a lot. Like the really, like if you want to make a game that good, you just got to make it 50 times over. And then the 50th time is the version we release.
Awesome. Yeah, you touched on this a little, but could you talk a little more about how much freedom you had with the story? Like, did you guys come up with these dinosaurs and like space shuttle area yourself, or was that like something in a script that you were given?
Again, it's a vague kind of diffused responsibility where it's like it was always space. It was always a little bit of dinosaurs. There was always the reveal of the T-Rex, like really, really early on. But yeah, in terms of like defining what the story is, it depends from moment to moment and like changed over the course of the project. For example, like for the museum, like it was always very locked in. It's like, oh, this is what it's about. It's about Ellie and Joel, and they're going to the museum for her birthday. Whereas like for the second flashback, it was, and like Neil and Hallie have a great interview article on this. It used to be wildly different. That was the thing that had the most iterations of anything I'd worked on, where it was in its first incarnation a story about Ellie and Joel going to meet Joel's partner, his like girlfriend slash fiance Esther, and then she dies at the end of it. But it was a bit difficult to establish her properly, to fully give her her due, and she wasn't anywhere else in the game. So we scrapped that idea, and then for a while we didn't have anything. We were trying to like figure it out. It's like, oh, is it Ellie trying to prove herself to Joel as somebody who became a troll? That doesn't make sense. And then I'm pretty sure I was the person who originally like put out the idea of like, oh, they're going to find these guitar strings, and so that then like tied back into the core theme, tied into the core motivation of the plot itself. But even from there, it just like several dozen iterations happened after that, where it was, oh, they actually get to the music store, they get there, get the strings, but then it's this whole hoopla, and then we actually cut that part due to scope, and then got the scope back, but then didn't want to redo that section entirely, so we added the bloater. And so it ends up working. Like, I actually like the fact that they, after the first infected fight there, look at each other and say like, okay, cool, we can repair our relationship later. Our safety matters more. There's this quality to it that I really like, where they're both kind of like assuring each other that it's like, no, this doesn't, like, we don't have to solve it all today. Like we can come back to this and like actually repair this relationship. But like the act of doing it now is what matters. And then a bloater attacks, and then all these other things come into crash, and then the reveal of the two runaways at the end kind of hammers home that like, no, there's this bigger unresolved thing that they need to talk about.
I like that a lot. Yeah.
Yeah, but it's like really when it comes down to like who writes something like that, like that tone I just described. That was just us going like, man, we can't make them getting the guitar strings. We don't have the time. Fuck it. Neil's like, I'm just gonna make them say that like they're gonna not give a shit after the first big fight. Like that makes sense. Okay, cool. It's still not enough. Let's add a bloater.
Yeah, sure.
With so many working pieces, I can like only imagine how often things are revised and worked at.
Yeah.
I was really curious about this as I was playing. How did your team navigate like through lines like the hero cards and notes? Like, do you get to place those all? Does somebody else tell you how many you're supposed to put in? What's that like?
So again, like I feel like maybe a broken record, but yeah, it was a very fluid process. So those kind of came, those all got set up more like mid to late in the production. So like a lot of the levels were locked down, and like for the museum in particular, like those were the last thing we actually added, was like those two specific cards. It basically like came down to, I think our final count was really determined more on like the number of places where we could put them, more than, oh, we wanted 50, so we're gonna find 50 places to put cards. It was always just like as a central element of level design, at least in the style of Last of Us, we had those nooks, those crannies, those explorable spaces. So we were always designing like little alcoves, little points, little places where there would be an exploration payoff. And then as they developed more and more, I was like, okay, they're going to be these superhero cards. They're not going to be like the Firefly dog tags. They're going to be, Abby's quarters. And so like the writing team came in, got everybody to survey. It's like, oh, I think I've got like 8 spots in here. Oh, I've got 5 in here. And then just kind of massaged it as such. Similar thing with the notes, where a lot of those kind of came on a bit later. But I think worked because they were then able to kind of play off of the main narrative and the main like pacing of the level really, really well. So they kind of like, yeah, they're kind of like this tertiary through line that Hallie and Josh in particular really just kind of got to go through and just kind of give that extra layer of narrative to all the levels.
I think the hero cards and state coins, state quarters, are both like great collectible ideas. I really like those.
Yeah, me too. So this scene, this moment, this flashback picks up right after Dina's told Ellie about her pregnancy, and we get to hear the really heartbreaking guitar moment. What were some things you considered when designing this museum section as the sandwich after such a powerful moment, and also as like the bridge to Seattle Day 2? If that's something you thought about.
Oh no, it was. I mean, it's like it's more abstract than you might expect, because initially it was actually flipped. Early on, it was going to be the flashback for the end of Day 2 or the middle of Day 2 after you meet up with Jesse, as we play with the Order. I guess the biggest way to kind of frame it is like with a lot of sequences and how we approached a lot as level designers, we're making sure each section is its own contained episode. So with the museum, like I knew kind of abstractly that it's like, oh, we need to come off a really negative, high energy note and then take it into the beginning of the museum, and then we're going to pass it off with another kind of low energy but starting to get tonally matched to the next part note. So it's like we knew like the color and the kind of alignment of the beginning and the end, and because of that we were able to like move it around, get it to align, and then tune it to where it finally ended up being. But yeah, in general, most of the designers approached each of their levels to ensure that they had a good, strong beginning, middle, and end, so that they can then, easily kind of snap together or pass off with each other. It's just like the core fundamentals of good pacing, basically.
In this scene, Joel talks about old movies. He says, "See, there was a sequel. It wasn't as good." That's generally true for movies, especially older ones, but considering this game is a sequel too, we're prompted to think about it a little longer. Are there any hidden messages in this line that you wanted us to kind of get from it?
I didn't write that line. I called out Neil on that line, and he just said, "I don't care what anybody thinks about this line. I'm putting it in." That's the long and short of it.
Yeah, that's so funny, because I mean, I feel like a lot of people definitely heard that line and they were like, this is a sequel too. I wonder if that had anything to do with it.
Yeah, no, I lampshaded the meta implications of it, and Neil just looked at it and said, like, I could care less. I think he just liked the fact that Joel liked Jurassic Park or.
Oh, I love that. As soon as he brought up Jurassic Park, I was like, yes, Jurassic Park's one of my favorite movies.
Yeah, it's so Joel.
Oh yeah. And like thinking about them going back to Jackson and having a movie night, watching Jurassic Park together, I love it.
I thought a lot about like what watching movies must be like for the people raised in post-outbreak day. That's so interesting. Like watching movies, like even if they just watch like a romantic comedy that's set in the past. I wonder if they learn a lot about society through that kind of media, or what kind of like, do they believe that all this stuff happened? Can they tell the difference between what aspects are fictionalized and what aren't? I think that's interesting. I think it's cool that that they watch movies, they have movie nights and all that.
Yeah, I think like we explored a bit more of that in some of the earlier drafts of the narrative. I mean, just, occasional bits and pieces. Like there used to be a part when they were getting to Seattle where they like rode past a broken airplane, and there used to be this whole passage where like Ellie and Dina were just kind of looking at him like, what the fuck? How? The world's really weird, man. I don't trust that they flew in this. I don't know.
Yeah.
But then I think that also kind of in particular got cut because like as we developed more of like Ellie's fascination with space, it would kind of need to change. And she's like, no, it can't. It gets even crazier, Dina. You wouldn't believe I'm going to talk about space now, which wasn't really going to probably work with the whole like, we're mourning Joel right now. Let's.
Right. Yeah. Very totally different. In this level in particular, and I think we all have had moments with this when we were playing it, there are a lot of dialogue moments that you can miss if you're not playing through as slowly. Do you think there's any moments that a majority of people have and will miss that we should keep an eye out, or like your favorite one, anything like that?
I think the biggest one I'm always bummed when people miss is just the hats in general as an interactable. I mean, like it kind of, as we developed that level a lot, like it became really clear that the missability really needed to be there. Everybody has, when it comes to downbeats, especially in video games, everybody has different tolerances for like how much fucking around and slowing down they're willing to accept. So for the people who want to like really dive in and just dig through everything, like that's there. But when you have people who are a lot more high energy and expecting a lot more intense pacing, they need that option to be able to run through. Like at least we kind of found in testing, because if you drag it out for even just one beat too long, they're also the type of players that will just flip up and disengage, and they'll lean back, They roll their eyes in the back of their head, going like, "Oh my god, I want to get back to the shooting." And even though they're outliers, it then it still lets us cover literally everybody else in the middle. Like you stay there for exactly as long as you want to, and that part of that too is like giving you that agency, giving you that choice as Ellie, where it's like, how long did you linger here? How important was this? How thoroughly did you explore it? It's like you stay there and get to stay there for exactly as long as you want.
Balancing missability. That's really interesting.
Yeah, I mean, as personally, whenever I play a game, I am a completionist. I try to find every hidden nook and cranny. Like, I go for it. So I really love that in The Last of Us 2, and then the first one. Ugh, it's fantastic.
Personally, I'm not a completionist in games, and usually I like to just speed through, but this level, I was like, oh my god, this is amazing. I just sat there for probably an hour in the entire level just doing whatever, and I still realized I missed things. I went on, I think I was on Instagram or something, and I saw you could climb up the dinosaur that you first see, and I don't know how I missed that the first time.
I didn't climb up the
Wait,
dinosaur.
you didn't know that? Bro, jumping off was the best thing ever.
This is exactly the other reason why missability is great.
Yes, totally.
It makes replaying the game so much fun when you're like, oh my gosh, I missed this the first time.
Oh.
And I spent so much time there, and I don't know how I missed that. And I'm sure I missed something else. And I'm like, next time I play, I want to go through and get everything in this level.
Totally. I was talking to a friend the other day who mostly plays multiplayer games. And we were having a discussion about linearity. He was saying I think he also really loved Breath of the Wild, and he was saying he likes that, and he likes fighting games and multiplayer games because nobody has the same experience. You really are having your own experience, and I love those games too, the ones that I mentioned, but Last of Us and Naughty Dog's games in particular are fairly linear, but I think that's a strength. It is a character-driven rather than a self-insert sort of game, which also does have its place. But the other thing is I love these. There is, despite it being a linear story, there is so much variability, like you mentioned, in how this game is played. And I think that's, again, like you said, the strength of missability. I really, I love hearing this. I love knowing that there's so much else out there that I didn't experience and that I can. Because I was totally satisfied with my experience, but I can't wait to find more.
Yeah, Matan was playing at a snail's pace, and we really had to make him pick up.
Well, okay.
I was like, Matan, turn the game to easy. Just go as quick as you can.
In my defense, Best Buy kept telling me, I bought it on Best Buy because originally I was going to go pick it up, and then COVID hit. And then I moved it to a different store, and then that store closed. It was a whole to-do. They told me it was going to arrive Friday night. They kept telling me it was going to arrive the next day. It didn't. So I finally got fed up, drove over to GameStop, picked up a special edition, and started it. And I like to take my time. I like to inhabit this world. I like to take a knee. But I did speed up so that I could be done for this podcast.
Yeah, one of our mutual friends messaged us, I think, Saturday afternoon, the day after the game came out, and was like, I'm done. What do you guys think? I was like, I feel that emotionally.
Oh, my God. I've seen, the people who rush that game, it's a very taxing experience to do that quickly.
And he really explored it, too. I was like, you did not sleep, and I vibe with that.
Yeah. So I'm curious then. So what did you guys think of the game as a whole, of the ending? You said 2/3 of you liked the museum as the favorite part. What was the other favorite part?
So I love the museum. I love it.
But
there were moments. It's so hard. I think that game flows really well, and so it's hard for me to chunk out moments. That being said, there were moments. I loved the downtown Seattle section. The inspiration from Uncharted Lost Legacy was very clear. I loved that. I lived in Seattle for a little bit, and so I recognized some buildings and some parts. It was just, the design was phenomenal. There were just moments where I was just in awe of what I was looking at, in awe of the things I was finding. In particular, I really liked going down into the bank and finding the guys who were heisting the bank on Outbreak Day. And they got infected, and then finding little notes. I found Nathan Drake's ring in there.
Yeah, that was so cool.
I don't know if that's my favorite. I guess it's just, we'll get into this more later. I absolutely loved this game. I beginning to end was there for the ride, and so it's hard for me to pick one favorite moment.
Just
It
the
sounds
whole
like you really like Seattle Hub. And also, I'm going to link this to Michael Barkley. Hey, Michael, how's it going? You really liked Seattle Hub. See, like I keep telling you, people like it. That'll be for later.
Okay, that's a secret tool. We'll revisit later.
But no, he's also the designer who did do the Lost Legacy open world thing.
That makes a lot of sense.
Seattle was this evolution of his like full experience.
Yeah,
To me-
and I love that in Lost Legacy. That was such a great part to play, and I spent so much time exploring. And like I said, I don't love super exploring things in games, but even that part, I did a lot of the extra stuff in there just because it was so much fun to explore.
Yeah, to me, it was the best of both worlds. It had the linearity that I love, and it had the sort of adaptability and
Definitely.
missability that I really like. I'm gonna keep saying missability. I like that word.
It's a good word. I also really like the downtown Seattle area. I kept texting Caitlin because I was maybe like 30 minutes behind her. We played almost at the same time. I was like, OMG, the bank. And she's like, what are you talking about?
What thing? I need to find the bank.
And I think that's another testament to how good this game is that, it's very personal, and when you're in it, you're in the world so much, but when you come out even for a moment to like get water and text your friend, it doesn't lose anything. It's still so amazing.
Absolutely. You touched on this a little bit earlier, Evan. When you mentioned Esther, but were there some other significant ideas that you consider for the level that didn't make the cut, or big ideas for the whole game that were cut or majorly adjusted?
Less than you might expect. Like the initial pitch was really, really, like Neil's initial pitch is really what the final game is in a lot of ways. Like there were some changes, some minor tweaks to the ending, character, like little details like that. I think in his initial pitch, he had this cute little transition where it opened with Abby's dad saying the line, "It's your turn now, Abby," and it cuts to them playing like a game of chess. It was a little like, but overall, like the core narrative, the core experience was always there. We actually trimmed a lot of fat in some regards. Like there was a whole sequence that I was just about to start on before it got cut, where like Ellie gets captured by the Seraphites and it gets dragged through like Passion of Christ level of just like mockery and getting strung up, and actually gets like disrupted by the wolf attacks. Like she basically kind of inadvertently gets saved by that whole slaughter. But yeah, in general, it was just like the core was always there. The 3 days, set in those like stark unfolding kind of, hinged storytelling. Like that was always the plan. That's always what we executed on. And yeah, everything else was just loose enough from the beginning that we just let it evolve. Because the second flashback was, at least what I worked on, the thing that had the most iteration, the most like, what are we doing here? What's changing? What's that? Like compared to one of my other sequences, which was Abby's intro at the beginning of the game, where it's like we always had like a clear vision. Like we sat down, we broke it. It's just like, all right, cool. This is going to be about Abby and Owen's romantic tension at first. So we're going to like kind of let you play with that and sink your teeth into that while we teach you the buttons, and then oh no, he's not only are they not together, they're super not together. His girlfriend's pregnant, and he thinks her idea is awful. Now she's super alone, and then motivated into that.
Yeah. So Caitlin and I have some controversial thoughts about Abby and about the ending. And what you brought up is really intriguing, like starting with them playing chess is really cool. I also really, by the end of the game, I really loved Owen and Mel. And I just looking back, like when we first see them, where we first think about them, Mel, because she's not really on the scene. That was very interesting too. Do you have any thoughts on Abby or the ending in particular?
I think it might be good to hear yours first. Go ahead, give your hot takes. You guys are the you're the hosts.
Do you want to
They
go
have
first,
some
Ariana?
thoughts, multiple pages in our Google Doc.
Yeah, I may or may not have written what is probably a blog post that I should get to publishing. So we talked for a little bit before recording this too with Matan. And Abby and Ellie are very much two sides of the same coin. And I mean, also, I'm in love with the voice actresses. I'm a big Critical Role fan, and I love all their other work. And so it was really nice to see in game how carefully those parallels are handled with the characters. Unfortunately, and while I really liked like what you were saying with Owen, finding, she's scared of heights, she's not that great at romance, like she feels like a person, but even in that first moment we get to play with her, we know she's there for someone. And I think most of us figured out she's there for Joel. And for me, unfortunately, it was just that cloud hanging over everything with her overshadowed what I felt could have been a really strong love for her.
Yeah, I totally agree. And personally, I think this is a great story. I think it was very well written. I have nothing like against the writers or anything. I think that was incredible. I just don't think it worked for me as a sequel to The Last of Us. I connected with Ellie so much in the first game. I love her so much. And by the end of this game, I almost don't like her. And I think
I don't like her.
And I think that might be the point of it. And I think that's what they want us to get. But I don't know. I just don't think it worked for me as a sequel. And like, I know Matan like completely disagrees. And I know it worked for a lot of people and I wish it worked for me, but I just personally don't think it did. And I don't think like it didn't work for Adriana either. So I think a lot of people it didn't work for, which I wish it, like I almost wish it had been other characters and like just like a complete spin-off of this world, because I think it's a great story. I think it's really well written. I really like the parallels they draw between Abby and Ellie. Like Adriana said, I really wanted to like Abby, but I couldn't. And that for me just was the deal breaker that made me not be able to be sold on this story.
Yeah, for me, I can handle a lot. I think there's a lot of power and suffering and going through shit and being in the trenches. But for me, the game ends at the farm. The last like hour and a half or however long it took you to play that just does not exist.
Who are the rattlers? I don't know them.
Yeah, there's no rattlers.
What?
Ellie, Dina, JJ, they're all happy at the farm. Tommy's a little
Wait,
bit, he's not
it just
making
ends with Lev and Abby dying strung up on pikes.
Yeah.
No, but we don't. But we don't
That
get
still
that
happens.
far.
No, Ellie never leaves. Ellie never leaves, so then that just happens. So
But
then
maybe
you just
that
want them to
whole.
start with that.
Maybe they never get captured.
Yeah, maybe they never get captured.
I
Maybe
know,
they
Ellie had nothing to
find
do
the
with-
fireflies.
I want to hear your thoughts, Evan, but real quick on mine, I just finished it. I absolutely loved this game. To me, it is a 10. I think Abby's character is just absolutely phenomenal. I love Ellie's arc. I totally understand why people don't like Abby, and I hated her at first. Again, watching her kill Joel was horrifying. But playing as her and seeing her world really gave me a different view. Seeing her, the flashback with the zebra, and her being with Owen and with her dad. The time, I love the stadium sequence. When you wake up in your stadium, you see her with all her friends. You see them with some of the dogs that you as Ellie just killed, 30 minutes before, but actually 2 days later in game. I thought that Abby was phenomenal. Like, it's about, they both lose so much, they both love so much, they both hate so much. I think this game would not have had the impact that it did if we didn't get to see this much of Abby. And I really like the ending as well. Again, another hot take.
No, we're the ones with hot takes.
Yeah, I think we're
I don't know.
You're fine.
I think fans are pretty split.
I've been media blackout on Last of Us, so I have to
That's true,
gauge what people think. But I think that the moment of Ellie getting up in the night and getting ready, and when Dean is trying to get her to stay, I thought that was really profound. I really loved it. There was so much unsaid there. Ellie kind of lets her hate rule her a little bit. It's self-destructive, sure. And I really like that she was gonna let Abby go, and then she wasn't. And that was a brutal fucking fight. And then she decides to at the last moment. I love all that you have these moments, these flashes of Joel's death and horrifying moments of Joel, and then she has this moment of peace, and she lets Abby live, and they go their separate ways. And I think, even though it ended up, this whole journey like harmed Ellie physically and emotionally, Dina left with JJ. I just thought it was beautiful and profound.
I'd like to actually talk about what you just said for a moment, and maybe unintentionally, but I was reading, oh God, what's the article? There's an article with Hallie and Neil, and they talk about Dina leaving. And I think that's an interesting point because she isn't the one who leaves. It's Ellie.
Fair point. Yes, I think that's...
Well, it's more that Dina commits to not being there when she comes back. It's like Dina packed up everything, completely separated from Ellie. Like there could have been a version of that ending where Ellie comes in the door and like just gets welcomed open arms by Dina.
There.
But yeah, in this case, or like, because if she was worried about taking care of all that on her own, like it's always kind of been implied, at least it's my headcanon, that like she moved in with Jesse's parents.
Right.
Like there were talks like, oh, they loved him, we're always so close, and it's like, oh, it's your grandkids. So, but she could have moved them into the house or any other type of thing. But instead, it's like she's very deliberately like, if Ellie comes back, I need her to come back to an empty house to know that like this is done and I'm done.
And I love that. I mean, I think by the end, I resonate with Dina more than anyone else. It's very powerful of her to have cut Ellie off. I mean, by the end, she's toxic. She's not a person you want around. She's not a person you want to let around a baby. I mean,
and then the open question is like, is she now sufficiently different? Like having gone through that, having actually chased that and made that final decision. That's why I personally really like the ending, because like I do picture her, like the reason is like she's not leaving that guitar to rot in the wind. She's not gonna like go off to the west. She's going to Dina probably.
Yeah.
She's gonna try and like she's headed to Jackson. Like she's not expecting to be gone too long. She's hoping at least to talk. But yeah, I don't know, like so kind of to the core of like what we were talking around is like, I don't want to speak too out of turn in terms of Neil, but it's like from just everything we went through making the game and testing the game on, like we had over 300 people play it over the course of production and like had their full thoughts, had them go through all of this. And basically like, aside from the intensity related to the leaks, very little of the specific takes have ever surprised us. Like, obviously, like we were a little shook and taken aback by just the amount of hate and vile shit that was spewing out when people were like, who's this buff lady? I bet she's some trans freak, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Or like, I'm gonna break this with a hammer. And like all of that, like, we weren't expecting quite that negative a response, but quarantine plus internet equals crazy.
Yeah, for real.
But at least in terms of like presenting the players with the challenge of like empathizing with Abby and knowing that it's like, this is not going to be 100%. Like there probably isn't a world where we can make it 100%. It's more that we're showing this, we're committed to doing this, and unlike say how if this was a Disney managed property where that wouldn't be an option available to us, we like Neil wanted to explore that. Like that was the central goal, was to kind of give this challenging dark evolution to the series instead of just doing another The Last of Us. Like trying to show like how the tone, style, and like even the preferences of the directors have evolved over like the 7-year period. Like the main reason why it's not Last of Us 1 again is kind of when you get down to it is like the people who made it aren't the same people they were after 5 years. Like one could jokingly just say that it's like, oh yeah, no, Uncharted 4 was so difficult to make. It made Neil into a curmudgeon. It's not the case, but no, I think it's just like a lot of growth and change, and I think that's why I think the structure kind of wound up the way it is. Like instead of necessarily just committing to being movie-like, Neil and Hallie really delved into being experimental, trying to find other inspiration or other structures. I mean, it's also kind of like no surprise when you kind of put it that way that it's like Hallie, who was like the main architect for like Westworld season 1, is like totally fine with hitting with a hammer, giving it this mosaic quality, and then making it all work and tie together in a way that like doesn't work for a 90-minute movie, wouldn't work for a 90-minute movie. But yeah, at the same time too, like I'd also be curious to see how your guys' thoughts evolve over time, because like one consistent thing I've been surprised by is people who go back and play it a second time end up loving Abby more than they did the first.
Yeah,
like,
and I think that's very true. When I first finished the game, I hated it so much. I was like, what the heck just happened? Why did I play that? Why did Naughty Dog do this? Like, what are they trying to do? And like, I was just really angry at first. And then I kind of took a step back and I looked at it. I talked to people. I watched a lot of videos on like both sides of the opinions, where some people were super angry. Some people absolutely loved it. And like, I've definitely calmed down from like absolutely hating it. Like, I don't hate the game. Like I said, I do think it's a great story. I think they did like a great job telling the story and writing the story and making these parallels. But I still just, for me, it doesn't work as a sequel. And maybe when I go back and play it, because I will go back and play it, I did enjoy the game. I did enjoy the gameplay and the like level of detail that was put in. So maybe I will like it more when I go back and play it. But for me right now, it's not what I wanted as a sequel.
You get what you get.
Yeah. I guess that's the thing where it's like that's
it might not be what you wanted, but it's what you needed. And I know that's a quote, and I think Neil Druckmann did say that. And I don't know if it's what I needed either. Not sold on that.
It's definitely not what I needed.
Yeah, not sold on that. I do think, and I know there's been like a little flow of like talking about The Last of Us, like a part 3 coming out. Definitely nothing confirmed at all. But I do think that could help the series for me if they went into it and I would love to see Ellie like kind of what am I trying to say? Just discover or let herself forgive herself for what her argument with Joel at the end, because I think a lot of her anger came from not fixing things with Joel when he died, like leaving things unsaid and leaving things where she had just said like, we can try to start fixing it, but I still am not happy with you. And I think that was a great storytelling way to do that, of having her not have that finished and having him die without having that resolution between them. And I think if there was a third game, I think it would be super interesting to kind of go into Ellie's head and learn about how she's dealing with that, because that's how people's relationships end a lot of times. Like, people die and you don't get that closure. And I think that's a really interesting thing to discover and like explore, and I think that would be really interesting for a third game. And I think a third game could help me both like Abby more if she was in it and we learned more about her, and just re-like Ellie again, because like I said, I don't like Ellie by the end of this game, and I don't want to not like Ellie, because in the first game I identified with her so much, and she is one of my all-time favorite characters from the first game, and this second game made me not like her as much. So and be the point, and maybe on a second playthrough I'll understand a little more, or maybe I'll just come to more terms with it. But I think a third game could help me like this more.
Yeah, I mean, it's very real for what a lot of people go through when they're coping with loss, when they're coping with trauma. I liked your headcanon, Evan, of like, she goes back to Jackson and she works, she puts in the effort. My God, I would love that.
She might not.
She might not, right?
She may just have turned west and like, or east, right, I suppose, and just headed wherever the hell she ends up.
Yeah, who knows? And there's something powerful in having that kind of devastating, unresolved ending. But with Ellie, because I've been waiting 7 years to see her again. And it was so powerful the first time playing as her, that I wanted some kind of redemption arc, some kind of resolution, something, because, personally, mental health too, you put in the work eventually and you're relatively stable. You go to therapy, you do all that, and you have your low point, but it gets better. And for Ellie, it doesn't get better. Maybe, who knows? There's no after.
I mean, I feel like the step of forgiving Abby was like that
Mhm.
final change
I agree.
to like set her on a better track. Like
Um,
everything up until that point was not necessary, but was what it took for her to get there.
I agree. I definitely agree, and I also think that we talked about this a little bit before recording. I think she needed to know that she could kill Abby. She needed to get there, and she needed that moment, at least to kill. She thought she needed to kill her, but I think in the end, um, she just needed to know that she could let go.
Yeah, she needed to do it with her own agency, which I think was the
Right.
thing that was missing in Seattle. That was the thing that actually I feel clenched extra hard around her, was that she didn't really get to choose whether or not to kill Abby. She had it decided for her. Again, like she's a person who, like, her big struggle with Joel was the fact that she didn't get to decide
Mhm.
how she died or who she saved or all of these other things. And
Good point.
yeah, there was like this kind of, in a twisted way too, like the vengeance really was only over when the mercy was reciprocated. Like until then, like Abby was gonna probably look over her shoulder for the rest of time and just kind of like be, it's like she could pop up again. I barely beat her the first time. I barely stopped her. Like I killed even more of her people. This is, you know, like seeing what she did before, I bet she's gonna come back. But in the case of her sparing Dina and sparing her, like Ellie pays the favor back, but is conflicted about doing it until the very end. But yeah, it's like finally getting to make that choice, finally getting to have that resolution. I think finally freed her in a way that she, you know, all the killing wasn't able to. I think that's the big takeaway of the game. That it was like,
Absolutely.
you know, she literally has hundreds of bodies stacked up. Not a single one did anything. Not a single one helped. Not a single thing did anything. And it's much more than just, oh, revenge bad. Like you shouldn't do revenge. It's like, no, violence, revenge, futile, meaningless. It's way, 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 way worse than bad. It's like actively like pointless. It's a empty void that just does worse than nothing. Like it's just, yeah.
I didn't think about it quite like that. I really like that interpretation. It's yeah, profound. Really about agency, and I think I really like what you said. It's not just about revenge is bad. It's worse than that. It's not. It's a black hole that sucks things in. Like that was really yeah. I love that. What was your favorite part of the game that was not your own?
Let's see. I have a lot of highlights, so I'm trying to think.
Your team members watching this are judging.
I just played through it. I was a really, really, really big fan of Seattle Hub. Like that was just I think when like the gameplay was singing, but like yeah, it's actually hard to pin down because like I think my favorite part overall, like my favorite element, is definitely the combat. Like a combat as it delivered, specifically like under like Anthony Newman and Kurt's guidance into like specifically Christian Rowland, who's like the Melee designer, the Melee animation tech designer. Like fuck.
Shout out to that guy. Shout out those Melee animations.
The Melee was incredible.
Yeah.
Yeah, he was just like the dedicated person, and it's like it just goes to show that like because Anthony Newman was that role on Last of Us 1, and they had to really scale back what his initial goals for like Last of Us 1's melee combat was, and it's like it all worked, but it was always this like kind of unresolved thing. And he just came to as a director, got promoted, and was just like, okay, cool, we're gonna do what I wanted to do the first time, and it turns out it was really fucking amazing what he wanted to do the first time. And that's where like things like the dodge and a lot of the more like fighting game aspects kind of came through, and really like the execution on that, I think, brings the rest of the game's narrative and a lot of the quieter moments to their maximum height. Because when you just have the like actual brutality that we render. Like again, kind of going back to like just how casually we do it, I think is the thing that still takes people off guard. You know, kind of going back that it's not just revenge bad, it's not sappy, melodramatically bad or sorrowful. It's the fact that we just let it sit there. It's just there. It like there is no commentary. There's nothing that can be said. Like you just diced a person into bits with a shotgun and they're now rolling down the stairs. That's how life works. Like there's no like other media and other types of things, they even when they try to be critical of violence, there's by even just trying to contextualize it, by even just trying to like put it within a framework of understanding, often leads to sanitizing it.
Yeah.
You know, that it's like, oh, by emphasizing the brutality, it's like, oh, it's about the suffering and the sorrow. It's like sometimes it's not. Sometimes you're screaming, sometimes you're just gone.
Sometimes the light just goes out.
Yeah, and it's just like, I think that's where like the combat to me is like the central shining element, because in addition to all of its elegant interplay and systems, like it delivers on that core idea best. That it's just like unsanitized violence in a way that just demonstrates the meaninglessness of it way more than any dialogue or any animation could really do. So it kind of like acts as the backbone of it, and it's like it's really strong and it's really intensive, and it's no surprise that for some people it's a little too much, but it's like I'm okay with it. I'm definitely okay with it being too much. I like as long as it gets to be framed that it's not fetishistic, that it's not in the same way that like Postal or something else where it's about the sadomasochism. It's literally just meant to be shocking and gross and empty, and that's what they did.
I think it really, that what you were talking about the sort of avoiding sanitization. I think I think that is a strength of this being an interactive medium, of it being in a game, because I mean, not that there aren't contextual choices, but I think, you know, if we do talk film or TV, even if they're trying to be objective, like the framing of shots conveys something. It has to be framed somehow. The angles, the makeup, all of these things have to be choices that are made. And I think in a game, well, some of that is true, you know, character design and animations. You are doing this. You are the person doing this, and also you are controlling the camera. You are controlling your options. You are controlling what you are doing to this person.
Nobody is telling the story of this violence. Anytime you're using something like cinema, like all the choices, like, oh, well, how do we frame it? How do we shoot this? Kind of goes back to that central point where it's like, even if you're not trying to, you're kind of like, you're giving an implicit frame of like, no, this is how violence actually is.
Right.
Well, I think that's interesting. I think one thing that kind of made me think of is the dogs in this game. You don't have to actually kill a dog until Alice, I believe. That's the only
that is
dog
accurate.
Yeah.
It is the only one you actually have to kill, and also massive dicks about it because Bear shows up twice if you don't kill him the first time.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Oh, does he really? That's great.
So you actually have 2 chances to kill Bear.
God, when I heard, like, I was playing as Ellie and I heard someone go, oh, she killed Bear. And I was like, oh, you know, I love that the AI have names for each other, the enemies. But then later in the flashback playing as Abby, and then you play fetch with Bear. I was like,
yeah, you're like, oh, I killed Bear.
I did not kill Bear, and I didn't realize that like that could change things.
Yeah, no, you had two chances to do it, and well, no, either way she plays with Bear. Bear either gets to live happily ever after and be fine. But that was like my favorite voice singer that is on a Twitter clip where it's like Ellie uses like a sledgehammer on Bear, and the response is just like somebody just screaming Bear! Oh. Just so much is conveyed with that, like, what the fuck? Why Bear?
I never meylayed a dog because that was too much for me. I always had to shoot them. I did shoot them. I'll admit, but I didn't want to.
Throw a brick and stealth away, man. It's just
it's like because you can also use high vaults to get rid of them because it's like the doggos can't climb walls, so you can get them around there. But it's like, a lot of people in our observations, they're like, oh, I would never kill a dog. No, I don't want to kill a dog. Oh no, and then they get murdered by a dog, and they're like, oh.
Fuck that dog.
Okay, wow. Okay.
I was like, okay, I'm not gonna kill any dogs. And then one like bit my face off, and I was like, okay, well, fuck the dogs.
I'll kill one dog. Yeah.
Well, it's like I think the best commentary I've seen on it is in Noah Caldwell-Gervais's 2-hour breakdown of the series. He like has a passage where he talks about the one time he had to punch a dog in the face, and well, it was a really justified instance because he was out camping and he has a much smaller dog, and just out of nowhere, this like large hound comes in and just grabs his dog by the neck and just starts flailing it around. And he only had a couple seconds to process it, try to get the dog to stop, and then ended up having to punch it in the face. And like he goes through it and he's explaining, it's like, this all happened in like twice as long as it took me to explain this to you. There wasn't much thought. I just had to instinctually like work with this thing. And he talks through like how that incident was always coming up in his head, not only just with the dog violence, but the violence in this game in general. Like there is a subtle justified quality to a lot of it, where it is meant to be like immediate, reactionary, and only in like the very specific cases does it start taking on the darker edge. It's always played with it. Like Ellie does feel like a hunter, but it's not really until Nora that she really starts being more proactive about it, being much more sadistic and focused on like it as a means to an end versus just as a means of vaguely justified self-defense or reaction.
There's that moment, great moment, when Nora's backed away in the corner and the camera, we're facing Ellie and she's about to torture her, and you have to press square and watch Ellie hit her a bunch. I was going to say, I got attacked by 4 German Shepherds last week. Did not punch them, but maybe I should have.
How did you get attacked by them? Like,
yeah, I was walking. Okay, kind of near
all
my
at
house.
once or all at a time?
It was 4 unrelated German Shepherds, all on the walk home.
Just Monday, Tuesday, Thursday, and Friday. Wednesday they were gone for some reason.
Wednesday they were gone. They had their day off. I was just walking.
Because you're Jewish.
Because I'm Jewish. That's exactly it. That's what they said. They were wearing these. Yeah. So I'm walking by. There's a bunch of RVs that kind of camp out a few blocks from my house. And I was walking home from somewhere. Maybe I was just out for a walk to get out of my house for once a week. And one of the this RV door opens as I'm right next to it, and 4 big German Shepherds just pile out, and they I'm like backed up against the fence, and the 4 of them are like barking at me, and I got bit on the ass cheek. And then the owner came out and like kind of wrangled them a little bit, and I was able to get away.
That's terrible.
Yeah.
I did not punch a dog, but if ever there was a time to, I think that would have been it.
That would have been it. Dogs are no joke, especially ones
Gonna
that
get
are
a
like.
rabies shot?
No skin was broken. I checked.
Oh, thank God. Yeah, no, dogs are no joke, man. Like, you do what you have to do. If it's real life, you do what you have to do. If it's a video game, don't kill the dog, man.
When you know that you have the option.
It's not 100 but don't kill the dog.
When you can restart encounter,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Anything else that you'd like to add, Evan? Any other moments or things you'd like to share about your work on the game?
No, I think we covered a lot of interesting ground. It's like it was a heck of a project to be a part of. It's still still weird because it wasn't something I would have expected to have done 3 years ago, but here the fuck we are now. I'm just like long-term plans are just to keep doing stuff like the museum, hopefully. I think as much as I like the violence, I've definitely had my fill of it. I think there's a lot we can do outside of it.
I have a good question. How long have you known that Joel was dead for, and how was it like keeping that secret?
Oh, I learned the first day on the job.
Nice.
And just like, kept mum about it. I think Chad almost got it out of me once, and then...
Our friend Chad, Evan and I play D&D together, and I pestered him every week to give me details. But he did not break.
Nope.
He told me he was working on a museum. That was as much as he said.
Yeah. But it's like, with that game, you don't know. It's like, oh yeah, cool, the murder box. Yes! That part.
Yeah, I also hope you get to do more things like the museum. That's my favorite part of the entire game. The violence will stick with me forever. I had a zombie apocalypse nightmare last night, so that was great.
Oh, good. That's a good sign that we did our job well
Oh,
enough.
yeah.
Um, well, are there any other projects that we should keep an eye out for or that you want to promote? Anything coming down the
Nothing that
pipeline?
needs too much heavy promotion right now. I'm going to be, working on some audio drama stuff. Still trying to figure out the next thing after Naughty Dog. Sure, I'll find out soon. But
Great.
right now, current project is resting from making this game because
Yeah,
I am very tired still.
Yep.
take a break. You earned it.
I bet. Yeah. Well, again, thank you for coming on. I think this was very enlightening. It was really interesting to get a look behind the curtain.
Yes, it's been
Yeah.
incredible talking to you. I learned so much from this.
Yeah.
That's why I like doing these types of things, because it's not just about like, oh, cool, no, please tell me, how much did you like me? It's not about that. It's about people like finding out how these things fit together. And I think helping share that understanding not only helps deepen people's appreciation of works like this, but also, I'm sure you guys have ambitions and your listeners have ambitions to want to pursue similar things. And it's like just understanding the mindsets and goals and processes of people who have done things were the thing that helped me the most in getting here in the first place. Like just, hearing how they done thunk like that.
Absolutely. Well, thank you very much for listening. You can find us on any podcast platform and on YouTube. We have video now. And that about does it for this week. We will see you guys next week.
See
Stay
you guys
safe.
next
I love
week.
you.
Bye.
Cool.